Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri and this is another Tada Genji video. In this video we're going to look at the Fukushima Ryu Shinobi no Maki. Now the reason that we're looking at this ninja scroll is because it is a Tada Genji based tradition. So first things first, you should have watched video number 9 before you watch this video. In video number 9 you will see the lineage of the Oda Toyotomi retainers, and if you have that information, then this video will make a lot more sense. But in this video, what we're going to focus on is the Fukushima clan, the Kumazawa as chief retainers, and then the Nojiri as a branch of the Kumazawa. And as you see in the picture, I have made, so the Fukushima clan run by the Fukushima, and they are Tada Genji. They descend from Genji Yorimitsu just like the Nojiri. So the Fukushima are Tada Genji. The Kumazawa, as the chief retainer, they are actually imperial. The Kumazawa are a southern court imperial family. And then the Nojiri is a branch of the Kumazawa, but they are a Tada Genji family. So the family that runs the domain, the head of the Fukushima clan, the Hiroshima domain, is a Tada Genji family. The chief retainer is a Southern Court Imperial, and the Nojiri that serve as the shinobi and the intelligence officers are Tada Genji that are related to the Kumazawa. And so, as said, this makes the Fukushima document a Tada Genji based document. And as I previously said, that the Fukushima family records show that Fukushima Masanori, who's the head of the clan in the early 1600s, is the descendant of Genji Yorimitsu, just like the Nojiri. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Nojiri are Tada Genji interwoven with the Kumazawa, Southern Imperial line. The Nojiri serving as something along the lines of Imperial Guards. So the Nojiri are stationed in the Nagoya area, serving as Imperial Guards for the Kumazawa, who are based out of the Ichinomiya area around Konan City. So if you don't know where these places are, you'll have to look at a map. But you have Nagoya, and then north of Nagoya is Konan, and then around Konan there is the Ichinomiya, and that is where the Kumazawa are based out of. After the uh, unfortunate turn of events in the late 1400s, the Kumazawa ended up, the Southern Imperial branch ended up in that area, and that's where the Kumazawa come from. The Nojiri living slightly south of there in terms of where the castle is located, but essentially serving as Imperial Guards. So, and then later on, one of the Kumazawa branches blends into the Nojiri. Basically, one of the younger brothers assumes the name Nojiri and takes head of the clan, and then the Nojiri basically become a branch of the Kumazawa at that point. But anyway, so what the reason to go through all this is to let you know that this is Tada Genji and Southern Court mixture. So this Fukushima tradition is a Tada Genji tradition. It's also, you could argue, it's a Southern Court tradition. It's a potentially a Jingunden tradition, a Kusunoki. So all of these things, Tada Genji, Southern Court, Jingunden, Kusunoki, all of these things actually are taking place in this one document. So for those who didn't watch video number 9 or didn't pay attention, we'll do a quick summary. So this Fukushima Shinobi manual, this document, is a result of Fukushima Masanori assigning Kumazawa Morihisa the task of creating an intelligence network. And so Kumazawa Morihisa then put the Nojiri in charge. So Kumazawa Morihisa is one of the chief retainers of Fukushima Masanori. So Fukushima Masanori goes to his chief retainer, says, I need a spy network. Kumazawa Morihisa goes, okay. Then Kumazawa Morihisa looks to one of the branches of his family, the Nojiri, and says, okay guys, make a spy network. So the Nojiri then created the Fukushima style from their Tada Genji and Southern Court traditions. And then this particular document, the Fukushima scroll, the Fukushima Shinobi no Maki, is said to have come about because Fukushima Masanori requested that the Nojiri create this document based on teachings that Fukushima selected or Fukushima chose. So this document is essentially a memory aid, a certificate, a record of the tradition, and the things that were picked come from Masanori and Nojiri. So Fukushima is sitting there meeting with the Nojiri, and they have an entire tradition, but not the entire tradition is contained within the scroll. The scroll just contains selected bits. Now, also should mention that Fukushima himself is a battle-hardened warrior with several victories under his belt. Okay, he has several key victories to his name. As he was also a descendant of the Tada Genji, just like the Nojiri, it's possible that he may have possessed some of these shinobi tactics himself prior to the Nojiri creating the system. So the final product of Fukushima Ryu could potentially be a combination of Nojiri and Fukushima knowledge. But it's hard to know that for sure, but what we know at a minimum is that the collection of pieces are Nojiri knowledge and tradition. So definitely this is Nojiri tradition, Nojiri knowledge turned into a tradition, but it could also potentially be a combination of Nojiri and Fukushima knowledge in the system because they both have Tada Genji roots. And as mentioned earlier, the document is not meant to be an all-inclusive document. It's something more like a certificate or a memory aid. Focuses more on magic and tools and doesn't really go into overall strategy. Actually, the final part of the document is something roughly translated as the scroll of refining intention, and that teaching reminds the student that the document is focused on advanced and wondrous things like magic and special tools, but that the student needs to focus more on the fundamentals of espionage and warrior traditions. In other words, that final piece warns the student, do not forget to sort of master espionage and warrior traditions fundamentally first, right? Before you get into these sort of advanced theories and magical things. Now, before we look at the document some more, in 2015 I did publish the entire document, and I provided additional commentary regarding Southern Court and Kusunoki-ryu. So the book starts with information about the Southern Court and the Kumazawa and the Nojiri and some Tada Genji stuff. And then it goes into the translation of the main text and then the addendum, and then it ends with some Kusunoki stuff. So I came out with that in 2015. This video is not meant to advertise that book. However, if you are interested, there's a cover of the book. The book is available. If you want all this information in book form, there it is. Now, I should say for the people that have the book already, or if you do get the book, on page 17 through 20, I did make brief mention of the Tada Genji connection, but I did not go into it in detail. However, in 2020, I decided that I was going to focus on that Tada Genji stuff, and so now in 2022, I'm making these videos which are focusing specifically on the Tada Genji aspects. Okay, so let's just do a brief overview of this book. You will see on your screen, on the left there will be a picture of the original text, and on the right are some notes. Not translation, but just general notes. Again, the translation, if you want the translation, you can get the book. If you want the notes, then here they are. Okay, so the document opens up right away. Right away it opens up into an advanced magical formula for manipulating the dreams of your target. The kanji means interlocking with dreams, literally to get intermingled with the dreams of your target. It's a very advanced magic. It's a form of cemetery magic or graveyard magic. It involves a special type of paper spell, which is then used to hire a ghost to help you get into the dreams of your target. So it's about dream manipulation, but it's also about using paper spells to engage spirits to do your bidding. So it's like very advanced, and it's the first thing that appears in the document. But probably one of the reasons it's the first thing to appear in the document is because this spell is very typical of Genji, of Tada Genji and Southern Court magic. So right off the bat, you know that the document's contents are going to be advanced, and nothing screams Nojiri than dream magic. Like, You talk about proper, the blend of like Tada Genji, Southern Court, esoteric things. I mean, attacking the dreams of your target. This document starts right off with that, so it gives you a good idea of what to expect from such a tradition. But now, not everything is just advanced magic. We also have in this picture, you can see that the document also contains an assortment of tools. So ladders, drills, saws, very common shinobi tools. The document doesn't really explain how to make or use the tools. It's meant to, because again, it's meant to be a reminder or a memory aid, a certificate, not an actual instruction manual. So whoever receives this document should have already been explained all of these things and trained in all of these things. Um, if someone receives the document and they don't, you know what I mean. So, for example, um, many of the items in this document are just a picture with a few words. So again, it's a memory aid, a certificate. It's not meant to be an instruction manual. Here is another. So this is another spell, a spell for sneaking into the property of your target. This spell involves the use of the eyes of a dog and put into a crimson pouch. Now, the for those of you that can read Japanese, there you go. If you can't read Japanese, it's a method about taking the eyes of a dog and doing things with it and putting into a pouch, etc., etc. And then you'll see at the end where it says kuden. So the kuden is actually that you wear the crimson pouch folded into your hachimaki, to your headband, which should also be crimson as well. So when you sneak into the property, you essentially make an an amulet from these dog eyes prepared a certain way and then put into a crimson pouch, and then that little pouch becomes like an amulet, and then you fold that amulet into your headband and you wear that when sneaking into the property. Wearing the spell in your hachimaki is a Tada Genji tradition. Now, that might be a common tradition. I don't know, but in the Tada Genji tradition, wearing spells in your hachimaki is there, right? So you folding spells, folding amulets into your headband is a Tada Genji thing. Again, it might be more common than that, but it's definitely a Tada Genji thing. And the use of the dog eye. So this spell, the amulet, the dog eye amulet spell is actually a Southern Court spell. It refers back to this event where a Southern emperor was executed, etc., etc. So there's a long story there. I'm not going to go into it, but this spell is very Southern Court and is very Tada Genji. Everything about this spell says Tada Genji Southern Court. Here we see the method of using your sword and the cord on your sword, sageo, to climb walls and go over fences. Um, some of you may be very familiar with this because in this sort of ninja world, quote unquote, using the sword to climb walls is very common, is very well known now. But the reason it's well known is because it comes from a Natori Ryu manual, and now everybody knows about it. But we see it appearing here. This technique pops up in Tada Genji, Southern Court, Kusunoki, and then, like I said, eventually it is in the Natori tradition. They have a document called the Shoninki in which this technique became very famous in the early 1900s. But the Shoninki is from later in the 1600s, and this document is from the early 1600s. And anyway, the use of the sword in this way, using the sword to get over fences, to get over spiked walls, things like that, to get up walls, to climb, is a Tada Southern Court Kusunoki tradition, of which the Natori Ryu comes from. So the Natori Ryu is a Kusunoki tradition. So it makes sense that they would have this technique as well. And then off to the bottom left is a picture of a special type of origami made with treated paper, and it can use to be transport burning things. And there's instructions for why you would do that and what to do with it, etc. But the device itself is paper thin because it's folded paper, and then but you can so you can just slip it anywhere. But it basically gives you a means to transport burning objects without having to actually carry like an iron or a metal, like a big object. You can actually just use this origami piece. All right, and here, just to prove to you guys that I'm not making this up, I'm not lying, I've put the signature page in. So the signatures at the end of the document show the Nojiri connection. From the author, so the first arrow on your right is the author of the document. This is the Nojiri that sat down with Fukushima and Kumazawa and created the system. Then third over, so the other arrow is showing the third holder of the tradition. So these, there's other Nojiri involved, but these are the two that are listed in the lineage, so to speak. The document is not dated, but based on the available knowledge of the document. For example, the life of the founder, the guy the Nojiri that created the document, we know that the document cannot be written after 1614. 1605 to 1609 is the best estimate. We know that the tradition is formed around these times from about 1605 to 1611-ish. In there, we know that the system is up and going. So when the document is actually written, it's probably somewhere between 1605 and 1609. All right, like I said, moving on. So after the main text, the rest of the document is a collection of annotations and oral traditions written down for future readers. So things that were potentially kuden or things that were, just traditions that aren't in the document, but they get written down there. So in short, you get the main text and you get a lot of additional notes. But some of the annotations seem to conflict with the source material. In other words, some of the annotations don't jive well with the actual document. And I did this in my 2015 publication. I discussed this a little bit. In some places, it's just wrong. So, in other words, what the original Nojiri author meant is not at all what the annotations are talking about. It's just not. It either mismatches completely, or like I said, in some places, it's completely wrong. There's one part where the Nojiri author is discussing the 5 constant factors, which is simply just the 5 constant factors taken from Sun Tzu's Tactics. But in the annotations, for some reason, they seem to think that it's the 5 virtues of Confucianism, and that's just not correct. So, but it is possible. It makes sense though, because the annotations are written about 200 years later. If the original is written in 1605 and the annotations are written in like 1797, I believe. I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head, but it's the 1790s. And then the transcription is actually from 1824. So the annotations were not written until the late 1790s. And then the transcription is the 1820s. So you can see how, hundreds of years later, potential errors can sneak in. Anyway, interesting enough though, the person writing the annotations is Terazawa Yukihiro, and he's a descendant of the great Lord Terazawa of Kyushu area, who was an avid Kusunoki Ryu student. Well, he was if you need to watch the Kusunoki lineage video, but he was an avid student of the Taiheki Ryu. So that's a Kusunoki Ryu, but it is Kusunoki as presented through the Taiheki commentaries, not Kusunoki through the actual family tradition. So Lord Terazawa was an avid Taiheki Ryu student, and one of his descendants in the late 1700s wrote the annotations. Again, in the final section, the scroll of refining intention, I want to address that again because regardless of all the stuff that was discussed in the video and that's in the document, the scroll of refining intention starts with the line, "Shinobi do not use magic in the beginning." Now, the word for magic is myo, which is wondrous, advanced, profound. And what this means is it's not just magic, but it's any advanced tactic or any advanced tools. So magic, advanced tactics, experimental technology, all of those things are translated as magic or as wondrous, advanced, right? So a shinobi does not engage in that level at the beginning. The idea is that a shinobi must have a very solid foundation of warrior arts before they engage in shinobi arts. And once they engage in shinobi arts, they need to have a very solid foundation of the fundamentals of espionage before they utilize the more advanced and experimental theories and techniques. So before we end, let's jump back for just a minute and let's look at one section of the original document which is glossed over by many people. Like I said, when I did the translation in 2015, nobody seemed interested in this part, and that's fair. But let's take a moment just to look at it, and I want to show you how these things are. What we're seeing is we are seeing a Tada Genji lineup. So in an earlier video, we talked about the mudra of tears or the mudra of mist, and that appears right here. It's Tada Genji, Kusunoki, right there. The next one over, we're going to skip that for right now because that's a little more complicated. We'll get into it later. Like I said, we're skipping. So the red arrow, mudra of mist, mudra of tears. We discussed that earlier. Like I said, boom, Tada Genji, Kusunoki. Next one over, we're skipping that for now. Then the purple arrow, sneaking into castles. This uses a knowledge of castle layout. This is where it says Kuden. This is where all of those things come in about knowing the castle layout, knowing how a castle is designed, knowing where to sneak in. In the annotations it goes into it. It talks about all of these different features of a fortress or a castle. So here we go. This is where that information comes in. And then in the blue arrow, the Genji ink stick. This is Genji tradition. Here we go. It even says Genji family, right? The Genji clan, right? The ink stick this is a type of battering ram. And again, it says Kuden. There's not much Kuden that goes with it. You take basically a pole and you soak it in oil so that you can smash doors in with it. So here it goes, the Genji battering ram. And then the yellow over here, a device for stopping arrows. It's interesting because the Genji are such archers, especially the Tada Genji. Remember, the bow and arrow is the main weapon. Archery, there's so much magic. The next video coming up will be about magic involving bows and arrows. But here we go, a device for swatting arrows out of flight, literally to knock arrows out of mid-flight. So this listing here has an incredible amount of Tada Genji information, but but it's overlooked because it's just listed in simple form, just the name of the technique. But in order to actually succeed at these 5 techniques listed here, one has to be fairly trained, have some good knowledge of Tada Genji tradition. Alright, so this video is long enough. Let's wrap it up. So in closing, let's look at these 3 things that hopefully have been shown to you, the viewer. 1. The viewer, you, understands that the Fukushima Ryu's origin in Tada Genji and Southern Court methods, right? Hopefully you understand that Fukushima Ryu Shinobi no Jutsu, the ninja tradition of the Fukushima, has its origin in the Tada Genji and Southern Court methods. So the Fukushima got the Kumazawa to get the Nojiri to make a shinobi tradition, and they made it based on Tada Genji and Southern Court methods. So that goes with the second point, that you understand the history of Fukushima Ryu and the families involved, right? So again, Fukushima goes to his chief retainer, Masanori, and says, we need spies, we need ninja. So the Kumazawa look at their branch family, Nojiri, and say, you guys know the espionage? Make a tradition for this clan. And there it goes. And that the Fukushima are Tada Genji descendants, the Nojiri are Tada Genji descendants, and the Kumazawa are Southern Court Imperial line. So hopefully you understand those 2 points. And then the last point is that, and I put this in red, shinobi arts should be reserved for students who have a solid foundation of warrior skills. Rushing into shinobi arts without a solid foundation of samurai skills is counter the methods and traditions. And I will say this again, anybody who wishes to study shinobi traditions needs to understand and comprehend the samurai traditions that the shinobi traditions are based on. To simply skip everything samurai and try to jump into shinobi creates an immense amount of confusion and misunderstanding. And that is it for this video. As always, these videos are meant to be brief, and they are meant to inspire you or to give you a starting off point. The material in this video is copywritten by me, so please do not steal this material. Please do not take it. Please do not copy it. Again, I hope it inspires you. I hope that it sets you off on your own investigations and explorations, but please be respectful.